Welcome to Issue 4 of the GBI Super Forecaster Board Intelligence Brief, dated April 9th, 2026. This week, we pivot decisively away from crisis tracking and into the strategic story that will define board agendas for the rest of the year. The governance infinity play. In the first quarter of 2026, at least 12 major governance framework changes landed across 10 jurisdictions, from Washington and London to Riyadh, Singapore, Beijing, and Tokyo. Read in isolation, each is a compliance update. Read together, they tell a single story. Boards that treat governance as a tick box exercise are about to lose ground to boards that treat it as an infinite growth engine. Over the next 15 slides, we will walk you through those shifts, what they mean for your organization, and exactly what your board should do in the next 30, 60, and 90 days. Let's begin. The thesis of this brief can be stated in a single line. Q1 2026 is the quarter where governance stopped being a cost center and became a pricing variable for capital. Three arguments underpin that claim. First, the old game is over. Static codes, triennial refresh cycles, and binary comply or explain boxes were replaced in 10 jurisdictions inside 12 weeks. Second, the new game is dynamic. UK Provision 29 forces a live board attestation on internal controls. The UAE merged its securities and insurance regulators and created a new tier of systemically important licensed persons under continuous supervision. China's revised CSRC code makes executive pay defend itself against stock performance in the annual report. The US SEC has opened the entire Regulation SK for a first principles review with a comment window that closes 4 days after this brief is delivered. Third, and most importantly, the prize is capital. The revised OECD methodology now benchmarks 53 jurisdictions that together represent roughly 95% of global market capitalization. Governance quality has become a quantifiable pricing variable in the cost of capital. The infinity loop is simple. Better governance unlocks cheaper capital funds growth. Growth creates more governance surface area, and the loop compounds. Boards that understand this will outrun the boards that do not. Here is the executive summary in 4 numbers and 5 headlines. Let's look at the 4 numbers first. 10 jurisdictions updated their governance frameworks in the first quarter of 2026. 12 discrete framework shifts are tracked in this brief. 95% of global market capitalization now sits under jurisdictions that adhere to the revised OECD methodology. And April 13th, 4 days after this brief is published, is the final deadline to comment on the US SEC's comprehensive review of Regulation SK. And now to the 5 headlines. First, the UK. Provision 29 of the FRC Code went live on January 1st. For the first time ever, the boards of code companies must make an explicit declaration on the effectiveness of their material internal controls in this year's annual report. Second, the EU. The Omnibus Wine Directive cut the CSRD reporting population roughly by half by raising thresholds to over 1,000 employees and 450 million euros. CSDDD was postponed to mid-2029. The mandatory climate transition plan requirement was removed. Early movers paid a cost. Mid-caps got relief. Third, the United States. The SEC has opened Regulation SK to a full first principles review, and the HFIAA final rules of February 27th extended insider reporting obligations to foreign private issuers. Fourth, the UAE. On January 1st, the Securities and Commodities Authority was renamed the Capital Markets Authority, and a new tier of systemically important licensed persons was created under continuous supervision. Fifth, China. The CSRC revised code is phasing out supervisory boards and folding their powers into audit committees, with new disclosure rules that make executive pay defend itself against share price performance. Any one of these would be a major agenda item. Together, they are the trigger for the infinity play. One slide on the Middle East, then we return to the main thesis, where we stand. We are at day 40 of the Israeli-Iranian theater. The US-Iran ceasefire signed on April 7th is holding, although the Lebanon carve-out remains unresolved, and succession rumors around Mojtaba Khamenei continue to circulate. The Strait of Hormuz is open, and marine insurers have begun re-rating premiums downward. What changed this week? Brent crashed from a peak of $109.77 down to $94.75. Oxford Economics officially called a GCC regional recession. Qatar's Ras Laffan LNG operations are running with 17 to 20% capacity impairment. And Iraqi militia attacks peaked at 19 incidents in a single 24-hour window before beginning to taper. The governance implication is the key point. Crises are not new. Governance shifts are. Scenario planning and continuity frameworks are now standing items for boards. And the 12 Q1 governance updates we are about to walk through are the real signal. From here forward, this brief is about what is changing inside your boardroom, not what is burning outside it. The United States. The headline is a single word: reset. On January 13th, the SEC opened a comprehensive review of Regulation SK, the disclosure backbone for every public company in the United States. The comment window closes on April 13th, 4 days after this brief. If your general counsel has not filed, this week is the moment. A few weeks later, on February 27th, the HFIAA final rules landed and extended Section 16 insider reporting to foreign private issuers, closing a long-standing gap. New compliance and disclosure interpretations were issued on January 23rd to help with edge cases. In parallel, the SEC formally dropped its defense of the 2024 Climate Disclosure Rule, which means investor-led frameworks like the ISSB standards and CDP are now the de facto baseline for U.S. climate reporting. For boards, 3 actions are immediate. First, file an SK comment, because this process will shape the definition of materiality for the next decade. Second, if you are a foreign private issuer, your insider trading policies, your 10b5-1 plans, and your window periods all need to be repapered. Third, re-anchor your climate disclosure strategy around investor expectations rather than a pending rule. And watch Rule 14a8 closely, because the SEC's ongoing review of shareholder proposal thresholds is material for any board with activist exposure. The United Kingdom. The big news is that Provision 29 of the FRC Code is now live as of January 1st, 2026. For the first time, the board of a code company must make an explicit declaration as to the effectiveness of its material internal controls, as at the balance sheet date, and explain the basis for that declaration. The first live cycle is this year's annual report. Provisions 25 and 26 have been updated to align with the Audit Committee's minimum standard, which is the hard anchor for how assurance mapping must now work. What is different? The old language of having a system in place is dead. This is an explicit effectiveness statement. It must show it's working, and the chair signs their name to it. But here's the infinity play angle. A live attestation is not just a cost, it is an evidence flywheel. It forces continuous controls operations. It raises the quality of internal data, which in turn accelerates M&A due diligence, reduces D&O insurance premiums, and lowers audit fees. Boards that embrace Provision 29 as an operating model will be able to export that model into their GCC and APAC subsidiaries and compound the advantage. Europe and the OECD, one slide, 2 stories. First, Omnibus 1, Directive 2026/470, published on February 26. This is the single biggest rollback of the Green Deal reporting architecture since it was enacted. The CSRD employee threshold jumps from 250 to over 1,000, with a net turnover threshold of 450 million euros. Roughly half of the companies originally in scope are now out. The CSDDD, the Due Diligence Directive, had its threshold raised to over 5,000 employees and its application postponed to mid-2029. The mandatory climate transition plan requirement has been removed, and a value chain cap has been introduced to protect SMEs from cascading demands. Winners, mid-caps, losers, early movers who already built CSRD machinery and now watch their competitors exit scope. Second, the OECD. The 2023 G20 OECD principles had their methodology revised in March 2025, and the new methodology now benchmarks 53 jurisdictions covering roughly 95% of global market capitalization. 6 pillars, including a brand new one on sustainability and resilience. Governance quality is now formally a pricing variable in sovereign and corporate capital flows. 2 actions. Rescope your CSRD program and figure out if you are still in. But do not unbuild. Retain the ESG data you collected as a strategic asset. The infinity play says this data, properly reused, becomes an M&A value driver and a cost of capital lever. The GCC, 2 jurisdictions, 2 very different but complementary moves. First, the UAE. On January 1st, Federal Decree Laws 32 and 33 of 2025 came into force. The Securities and Commodities Authority has been renamed the Capital Markets Authority, and insurance supervision has been folded in underneath it. This is a super regulator. Critically, the new framework creates a tier called Systemically Important Licensed Persons. Firms that fall into that tier are now subject to enhanced governance, capital, and resolution requirements under continuous supervision, not a triennial review cycle. The cadence of supervision has changed, and boards of UAE-listed and UAE-licensed entities need to match that cadence internally. Second, Saudi Arabia. On April 2nd, the Saudi CMA approved 3 consequential changes in a single sitting. New rules on how boards can be dismissed, including new minority shareholder protections, a revised dividend distribution regulation covering timing, disclosure, and interim dividends, and formal rules permitting SPAC listings on the NOMU parallel market. This last one is a material unlock for the Saudi IPO pipeline. Taken together, the GCC is not doing cosmetic governance. These changes reprice governance quality into the cost of capital for the region's largest listings and for everything in the IPO queue behind them. Asia Pacific, 3 hubs, 3 very different theories of governance. Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Code's 9-year hard cap on independent director tenure and the mandatory individual remuneration disclosure requirement went into effect on January 1st, 2025. And we are now entering the 2nd annual disclosure cycle. Singapore has chosen to treat independence as a hard boundary and pay as a public signal. The play for boards is to use individual pay disclosure as a talent signal, not as a liability. If your numbers cannot be defended in public, your talent strategy is broken regardless. India. The CB Low DR Amendment Regulations of 2026 were published on January 20th. The big structural change is that the high-value debt-listed entity threshold moves from 1,000 crores to 5,000 crores of outstanding debt. Regulation 62K has been substituted, secretarial audit is being aligned, and there is now a unified framework for unclaimed amounts. The play for mid-cap Indian boards is to use the threshold relief as runway for scale, rather than as an excuse to coast on governance investment. China. The revised CSRC Code of Corporate Governance for listed companies took effect on January 1st, 2026. The most consequential change is the phased out of the supervisory board. Its powers are absorbed by the audit committee. Executive compensation must now be directly linked to stock performance, and any disconnect between pay and performance must be disclosed and explained. For Chinese listed boards, this effectively turns the compensation committee into the strategy committee. 3 very different theories, but the same underlying movement. Governance is becoming operational, measurable, and continuous. 3 more pieces to round out the global picture. Japan. The Tokyo Stock Exchange and the Financial Services Agency jointly convened an expert panel to revise the corporate governance code, and the 3rd meeting of that panel took place on April 3rd. A full code revision is planned for mid-2026. In parallel, the Financial Instruments and Exchange Act amendments from 2024 become effective on May 1st. Most importantly, the TSE's so-called Cost of Capital and Stock Price Conscious Management Initiative continues to publish and rank issuers on whether they disclose and act on their price-to-book ratio. The play for TSE-listed boards is to preempt the mid-2026 revision by building a credible P over B greater than 1 narrative now, rather than waiting to be listed. Australia. The fourth edition of the ASX Corporate Governance Principles from 2019 is still technically in force. The draft fifth edition was rejected in 2024 because it was seen as too prescriptive. The ASX Corporate Governance Council, now chaired by Dr. Philip Lowe, is reworking the fifth edition with an explicit simplification mandate, and public consultation is expected in the third quarter of 2026. The goal is to reduce the 63-page rulebook. Australia is effectively the global test lab for less regulation, more outcome, and boards everywhere should watch and submit. Finally, the AI governance layer, which cuts across every jurisdiction. The EU AI Act becomes fully applicable on August 2, 2026. That is roughly 4 months from the day we are publishing this brief. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework and ISO IEC 42001 are the de facto board assurance stack that global regulators are coalescing around. And board-level AI literacy is now explicitly required, not aspirational. If you have not yet appointed a non-executive director with AI literacy, mapped your models to risk tiers, and stood up a human-in-the-loop policy, you have 4 months to do so. This is the mechanism. The infinity loop has 6 nodes and it compounds. Start at position 1, trust. Trust is earned by attesting, disclosing, and defending your governance posture in public. The UK Provision 29 attestation, the US HFIAA disclosure, the China pay performance narrative. These are all trust inputs. Position 2, data. The process of attesting and disclosing forces you to build an evidence flywheel. You are generating higher quality internal data on controls, on pay, on risk, on supply chain, on AI model inventory. Position 3, capital. Higher quality disclosure lowers your weighted average cost of capital and tightens your credit spreads. The OECD methodology that now covers 95% of global market capitalization is the pricing engine behind that. Position 4, speed. Lower cost of capital and better internal data translate into faster board decisions, faster M&A due diligence, and faster exits. Position 5, growth. Speed compounds into growth. You buy better, you enter markets faster, you attract better talent. Position 6, mandate. Growth delivered responsibly earns you the license to expand into new jurisdictions and new products. And then the loop restarts at position 1 with a bigger surface area. This is why it is an infinity play. Each turn compounds. If you sit out one turn, if you treat Provision 29 as a compliance exercise rather than an operating model, you do not just miss one cycle, you miss the entire compounding curve. Your competitors, meanwhile, are 2 loops ahead. The action framework, 30 days, 60 days, and 90 to 180 days, all populated with governance data from this brief. Next 30 days are urgent and non-negotiable. File your SEC Regulation SK comment by April 13th. Stand up a Provision 29 attestation working group if you are in scope of the UK FRC code. Rescope your CSRD population under Omnibus 1. Appoint an AI-literate non-executive director before the August 2nd EU AI Act deadline. Review your UAE CMA systemically important licensed person exposure. And brief the full board on all 12 Q1 framework shifts in a dedicated session. Next 60 days are structural. Map your assurance model to Provision 29 and the Audit Committee minimum standard. Rewrite your executive pay narrative so it can defend itself under China CSRC disclosure. Repaper Section 16, insider policies for FPIs under HFIA. Rebuild your CSRD and CSDDD program as a strategic asset rather than a reporting burden. Submit to the Australia ASX 5th edition consultation and stand up an AI risk register anchored on NIST RMF and ISO 42001. 90 to 180 days is where the compounding happens. Publish your first live internal controls attestation. Position actively for OECD-aligned capital flows. Use your ESG data as an M&A due diligence accelerator. Export the UK Provision 29 attestation model into your GCC subsidiaries. Build the TSE price-to-book greater than one narrative preempting the Japan mid-2026 revision, and embed governance KPIs directly into the CEO scorecard. That is the infinity loop in operational form. 8 governance indicators, a Monday morning dashboard for your board. 1. SK Comment Pulse. Roughly 900 comment letters filed and rising, with the deadline on April 13th. Up 14% week over week. 2. UK Provision, 29 attestations. 0 filed so far out of an estimated 350 in-scope code companies. The first cycle begins with this year's annual reports. 3. CSRD scope-outs under Omnibus 1. Approximately half the original population has been rescoped out. 4. OECD methodology coverage. 53 jurisdictions, roughly 95% of global market capitalization, stable. 5. UAE systemically important licensed person designations. The first official SILP list is expected in Q2 2026. 6. China pay performance filings. First disclosures are landing right now and should be monitored for tone and defensibility. 7. AI Act readiness. 4 months to full applicability on August 2nd. Countdown. 8. ASX 5th edition public consultation window opens in Q3 2026. Prepare. Run this dashboard on Monday mornings, and you will never be surprised by a framework shift again. The risk map. 5 ways that a Q1 2026 framework shift becomes a direct board liability. 1. High severity, United Kingdom. A Provision 29 defect, where a board declares material internal controls effective when they are not. This exposes directors to Section 172 claims and to audit-related litigation. 2. Medium severity, United States. SK comment silence. Boards that miss the April 13th window lose a seat at the table on how materiality will be defined for the next decade. 3. High severity, European Union. The CSRD unbilled error. Boards that exit CSRD scope under Omnibus 1 and shut down the ESG data flywheel they built will pay a permanent cost of capital penalty as OECD-aligned investors continue to ask for the data anyway. 4. High severity, China. A pay performance mismatch where the new CSRC disclosure regime reveals that executive pay has been rising while the stock has been falling with no written defense. 5. Medium severity, European Union again, the AI literacy gap. No AI-literate non-executive director appointed before August 2nd creates personal liability exposure under the EU AI Act. None of these risks are theoretical. Each one maps to a specific filing, a specific cycle, and a specific deadline that is already on the clock. The board call to action. 7 moves, 1 week, move 1. Convene a special board session within 7 days. The agenda is the 12 Q1 framework shifts in this brief. Map to your geographic and legal footprint. Do not fold this into the next scheduled meeting. Move 2. File a substantive SEC Reg SK comment letter by April 13th. Do not cede the materiality definition for the next decade to somebody else's working group. Move 3. Own Provision 29. If you are a UK code company, set up a chair-led internal controls working group, name the chair publicly, and publish a plan before your next audit committee meeting. Move 4. Rebuild, do not unbuild. If you are exiting CSRD scope under Omnibus 1, retain the ESG data you have built as a strategic asset and wire it directly into your M&A and investor relations processes. Move 5. Appoint the AI-literate non-executive director before August 2nd. This is not a committee decision. It is a named director with defined authority accountable for AI risk. Move 6. Rewrite the CEO scorecard. Embed explicit governance KPIs, attestation cycle quality, disclosure quality, regulatory posture into the CEO and CFO pay package. Move 7. Run the infinity loop. Adopt the 6-node loop. Trust, data, capital, speed, growth, mandate as a standing board dashboard. Track it quarterly. The headline for this entire brief is 1 sentence, and your board should leave the room repeating it. Governance is no longer a cost. It is the infinity play. Thank you.